You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Well, good evening, everybody. This is Michael Murphy, trying to be a voice of reason in a world of chaos. Lanterns Media Network, lanterns.buzz. We hope you'll go and check out all the great articles and the great broadcasts and podcasts that are over there. I'm like normal. I'm having a tough time figuring out what to talk about because there's so much. I'm also pretty down. I don't know how else to put it. I watch what's going on every day. I keep up with the news, but I don't watch the news, if you understand that. I can't stand watching everybody telling me what I'm supposed to think about what's happening. I give me the facts, I'll figure it out, okay? So many things get left out. So many things get made such big deals about that probably ought to be left out that are in the big scheme of things aren't a big deal. I did a video here a couple days ago, and I hope you'll go take a look at it. It's on Lanterns, and it's also on the Voice of Reason YouTube channel. I sort of titled it, The Socialism is for the People, Not the Socialist. And this is in regards to little Charlie Gard, and that's an emotional thing for me. I looked at that little baby. I looked at those parents as they fought for his right to live. I don't trying to be nice here. Well, a hospital on behalf of a government and a nationalized health system, who were saying that the baby needed to die with dignity. Now, we're talking an 11-month-old baby that can't eat, can't sit up, can't poop anywhere but his diaper. What dignity does he have? We as conservatives have a tendency, I don't have a tendency, I have a go full bores ahead right to life. And I understand that there are times when there are situations that are hopeless. And nature has to take its course. I'm not somebody to say, well, we got to do something no matter what. While I like the fact that there's, marvelous medical technology out there, if I had something that's just making my lungs go and making my heart beat, and I'm laying there and I'm a vegetable, I would hope my wife would say, you know what, it's time to go. Because this is not the best place on earth. We've got something to look forward to. And if you're an atheist, you've got nothing to look forward to. And I feel sorry for you. But as Christians, we believe we have something to look forward to. And that's where Charlie is now. And he's better off there in the big scheme of things. But we hold life dear. And to have a situation where there were people who believed that they could help Charlie. They weren't just saying that. They've actually got a track record. There's a young child here in the United States, I believe that's about 5 years old, that was born with this same problem, and he's still alive and is functioning. And this doctor that had worked with that child also was willing to work with Charlie. And the arrogance of a hospital and a health industry, and I don't think it's arrogance. I think it's power. We're talking socialism here, and they cannot allow the free market to work, or it shows the failure of socialism. And so if it means that a child has to die, then so be it. It would not have cost the hospital or the National Health Services one dime. The family had raised like $1.7 million, and I don't know if they had really raised it. I think it was just people were just trying to pour money in there, trying to give them some hope. It would not have cost anybody anything. The money was there. Bring that child here. Our Congress actually took action and gave, so that there wouldn't be any issues with passports and visas and things like that. They gave Charlie's parents and Charlie U.S. citizenship so that they could freely travel to this country for help. But the powers that be decided that they could never let that happen. They could never let somebody go outside of that system. They decided they knew better what was better for Charlie than his parents or any doctors, and they've drug it on for so long that that's the way it became. It became that it was too late. There was no hope. Had Charlie been able to go there 2, 3, 4 months ago, it would have been a different story, possibly. We don't know. And that's what we do, is we try, don't we? We don't just give up on people and say, it's your time to check out and go. No, we do what we can to help save people. And I think it's very clear, I don't know where all that money came from, but it's very clear that there was a very large outpouring of help for this family, and yet they were, in the end, unable to bring their child to try to have any help. It was a very sad time for me. He passed away last week, and he would have been 1 year old this week. And I just don't think there's a place for people who are so cruel and unfeeling and unthinking. Look at a situation like this and say, no, you may not have hope. Nobody should have that kind of power. But that's what socialists are all about. Once again, socialism is for the people, not for the socialists. I can guarantee you that none of those people would be caught in this position because they have the ability to go elsewhere, and they would have nobody to stop them from going elsewhere. And that's the way socialism works. Now, of course, I'm glad that we don't have to worry about that here in this country because we have a free market. We don't step in and take people's children, and we don't take control of them without their permission. We don't do things like that in this country, except, well, we do. When I heard about this a couple of days ago, I was outraged. And I don't have any other words for it. Amy Fabbrini, it's easy for you to say, right? Amy Fabbrini and Eric Ziegler. I don't know if they're married or if they're just, living together, what their situation is. But they live in Oregon. I believe they're in Redmond, Oregon. Don't quote me on that. I didn't write it down. But I believe they're down in South Central Oregon. Fairly rural part of the state. They're well away from Portland and all that. 4 years ago, they had a son named Christopher. I don't know why I keep doing this in the past tense. They have a son named Christopher that 4 years ago was taken by CPS, Child Protective Services. And they've been fighting to have their son returned ever since. But this is not going well for them. Now, in December, there will be a trial to terminate parental rights. She only has a court-appointed attorney, and we know how that goes. And she is working, and I believe there are some things happening. I think a GoFundMe page has been started for them, and they're hopefully will get some decent legal help here soon. But we're talking 4 years now. They've been trying to get their son back. In the meantime, she got pregnant again, and she has a son named Hunter that was born in February. CPS stepped in and took Hunter from the hospital when he was 2 days old. They never got a chance to have him at home, and they have fought for his return as well. And as I talked about in my video, you would not believe what they did to deserve this. I hope you're prepared. They have the audacity to have a low IQ. You heard me. They have a low IQ. Now, if you go out and you search and you look for what an IQ means in the real world, you'll discover it really means nothing. It's a meaningless measurement that's arbitrarily placed to give people positioning in schools and training and one thing like that. But in the big scheme of things, I believe her IQ is supposed to be in the low 70s, and Eric's is in the high 60s. I've not heard Eric speak or seen anything about him, but I listened to a fairly extensive interview that Amy did. Amy was very cogent. Amy spoke freely. She didn't stutter around. She didn't search for words. She didn't act like she couldn't follow the interviewer. Ask her questions. Ask her some very pointed, some very personal questions. Ask her things like, what is it like to have the world talking about you having a low IQ? So she was asked some very direct questions, and she handled them all very well, and she didn't beat around the bush. She answered them all. Unlike people with high IQs, they have a tendency to say whatever they want and not answer the question. And maybe that's the problem. I don't know. The bottom line is she did not sound like somebody who would have trouble raising a child. She sounded like she was very loving, and everything she said was, I want my child back. I want my sons back. I'm a good mother. I want a chance to have my children. Now, who does the state of Oregon think they are? Are they any different than the hospital and the National Health Service in England? No, it's the exact same thing. And if you want to know why I'm upset and why I'm down, it's because these are the sorts of things that show how far down the path we really are. We lots of times think, well, we're America. We've got all these freedoms. We've got all this stuff going for us. And yet, story after story after story of things like this pop up. And if you're not the right person, if you don't know the right people, the government, whether it's state or local or federal, can come down on you and crush you and walk away and not even look back. They really do not care about you as a person. And we need to make some changes in this country, and we need to make some changes in our lives. I brought up in this video that I did, I brought up civil asset forfeiture. I've talked about this quite extensively. And for all the touting of the wonderfulness of Donald Trump and Attorney General Sessions coming in and going to save the day, and we're going to drain the swamp. And yet Sessions comes out the other day and they're doubling down on civil asset forfeiture. There is nothing that is more blatantly against the Constitution than civil asset forfeiture. You have to understand, I study the Constitution. I study our founding very seriously and quite extensively. And this is one of the core things that our founders fought against was the absence of due process. The fact that a government official could just come into your house and take your things, take your children, take your wife, do whatever they wanted. That was something that they just absolutely found anathema. And we think it's okay because we get to, it's the druggies, it's the mob, it's whatever. It doesn't affect us. Well, I talked the other day about the family, the older couple in Dallas, Thai immigrants from Thailand, had a wedding dress shop, and the IRS. And here's what happened. They made deposits. Now, once again, here we go, Patriot Act, another violation of our constitutional rights. You cannot make deposits into the bank from a business, or personally, for that matter, in excess of $10,000 without raising red flags. And so to avoid raising red flags, people have a tendency, especially with businesses that, a grocery store, and that's, I've seen this with small grocery stores and businesses, and in this case with this wedding shop, they would bring in deposits of $9,400, $9,600, $9,200, trying to stay under the $10,000 limit. Well, guess what? The IRS sees that, and they go, well, they're trying to stay under the $10,000 limit. They must be doing something wrong. They came in, no due process, told them they owed, I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars in taxes, and that they did not owe. They had their store confiscated, and the dresses were sold. They had I talked about this the other day. They had about a $600,000 inventory that the IRS sold on average for $3 a dress. They raised like around $6,000 in this sale. It was absolutely obscene, and those people should all swing. I'm sorry. They should all swing, at least by their thumbs, if not by their necks. I am so sick of this. CPS coming in, taking children, deciding who lives and who dies. What business survives or fails? We went through that in 2008, 9, 10. Government came in. They told there were, all the five major banks. There were two that were in desperate straits. There were three that were actually doing okay. And the government said, you will all take the bailout. And the three that were healthy said, no, we don't need the bailout. And the government said, you don't understand. You're taking the bailout. This is what we live under. And yet we see people out here, they're worried about the Kardashians, and they're worried about Bruce or whatever Jenner. They're worried about, they called me a her, and I want to be an it. It's just unbelievable what passes for people's importance in their life. These things are such direct violations of our Constitution and protected rights. The Constitution was clearly written. If you read the papers that the men wrote, if you read the writings that they wrote that preceded them, if you read the Constitution itself, the Constitution is a restriction on government, not us. Yet socialism is a control of the people, and they control us to protect their power. I'm tired. I'm so tired of all this because people run around worrying about little things. Who's the communications director for Trump, or who's the AG, or who's this or who's that? They're going to do this, and they're going to take names and kick butt and all that stuff. Then you're a never Trumper, you're an always a Trumper, and you're fighting with each other about that. Bottom line is, you know what? That plays into the hands of those who control us. because we fight amongst ourselves and we look at the little fluff stuff on top that really in the big scheme of things doesn't matter, and they keep marching down the road to serfdom. It's time to wake up and pay attention to what you're losing, everybody. We're going to take a little bit of a break. Well, thanks for staying with me. I really do appreciate the fact that you take the time to listen to this broadcast, this podcast. The fact that I have a few things to say, maybe I say some things in a way that you haven't thought about. I do appreciate the fact that you're here. Once again, I hope that you'll go into lanterns.buzz and check out all the great broadcasts and things that are going on there. Broadcasts and also some good articles. It's an interesting world that we're in. People talk about their rights, and we're going to spend some time talking about rights here. We hear Bernie Sanders talk about health care is a right. We hear a lot of these people talk about these things that health care is a right, food's a right. I mean, we went through this with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had a constitution that guaranteed a living wage, guaranteed housing, guaranteed all sorts of things. When a government's big enough to give you whatever you need, it's also big enough to take away everything you want. I saw an interesting comment made by a friend, and he's exactly right, and it is stuff I've talked about before, and I wanted to kind of go over some of this, and I'm going to kind of go back and forth with his comments and some things that are on my mind. One thing we've got going on is there's a difference between positive and negative rights, and I think we need to spend some time understanding those things. And if you'll Google it, there's some good videos out there that are reasonably short. They're 5-7 minutes long that explain this very well. Quite simply, a negative right is something that nobody has to do anything, and it doesn't cost anybody anything for you to have your right. If I've got the right to free speech, does that cost anybody anything? No. If I say something you don't like to hear, does that really cost you anything? In the big scheme of things, does it hurt anything? That's what this country's all about, is an exchange of ideas. And if I say, you know what, you've got a red tie, and I don't really like red ties. Well, that's an opinion. It really doesn't matter to you. Does it really matter whether I like your tie or not? And yet we have people, they tend to get all offended about that and all worked up about it. They called me fat. Well, maybe you need to lose some pounds, maybe you don't, but so what? I was raised with the old, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But that's not the way it is anymore. Everybody's so worked up about it. We see the colleges have got the rooms where the kids can go off there and with coloring books and Play-Doh. Excuse me, are you kidding me? I don't... They can't be challenged. I read, I guess my wife told me about a deal the other day, that the head of diversity at some university is talking about why they will not allow conservatives to speak at their college. So, if you... The head of diversity will not allow conservatives to speak at a college. Let that sink in. The First Amendment is not a gift of rights, and it isn't a government guarantee of your ability to do things. The government should not, and if you read the text, cannot go around protecting your First Amendment rights. Only government and only Congress can violate your First Amendment rights. Congress could pass a law that says, you may not do this or you may not do that. As far as the Constitution is concerned, this is an accurate statement, but in reality, what have we come on to? We now have judges and the judiciary writing laws. Congress can write a law and say what they want. And for instance, the deal like with the gay marriage, whatever like that. Used to, what happened was is if the Supreme Court discovered that there was a problem with a law, then legislature had to go rewrite the law and figure out what to do. Not so anymore. The judge says, here's the way it is, and that's the way it is. And suddenly the law has changed, and not just at the word of a judge or the word of a panel of judges if it's an appellate court or the Supreme Court. They need to read the Article 3 of the Constitution. They profess to want to protect it and guard it and all like that. But Article 3 does not give them the right to do what they're doing. It's very clear. I got in a discussion with a fellow here it's been a number of months ago, over the Marbury v. Madison case in the Supreme Court in 1803. And Judge Marshall took on this course, and it was over kind of a foolish little thing. For this discussion anyway, it doesn't matter what it was about. Bottom line is the fellow I was discussing with looked at it, he says, "What is your problem with that case? The court decided it correctly." I said, "Yes, the court decided it correctly." I said, "The problem with the case is the court had no authority to decide it. It was not in their jurisdiction. He just decided, Judge Marshall decided that it was." There's a very good letter. I would encourage you to look it up. I haven't pulled it up here, but I've read it so many times. I can tell you right now, it was written, I believe, in 1823 from Thomas Jefferson to Justice William Johnson, who was a Supreme Court justice at the time. And it was over the problem of a Supreme Court that was overstepping its bounds. And he quotes Judge Marshall in his letter. He says, the Chief Justice says, "But there must be a final arbiter." He's saying, the judge is saying, somebody's got to stand up and say, okay, here's the final word. And he believed it to be the court. But now Thomas Jefferson, who is the author of our Declaration of Independence and who worked very closely with James Madison in many ways and understood what our Constitution really said, he understood that in Article 5 was where the final say came in, because the legislature, 2/3 of the legislatures, can propose amendments to the Constitution. If there's something that's amiss that needs to be changed, 2/3 of the legislatures or 2/3 of the states. And it's important to note that we've never done it as states. But if you follow me, you know that I'm a very big advocate of the Convention of States project. And I saw a friend made a comment this evening on Facebook. He used to be the state coordinator in South Carolina. He has recently stepped down from that position, but he's a professor of constitutional law. He teaches classes every year in constitutional law. We have a situation now, and he said we've got people. And what brought it up is the idea that I think South Carolina Blue Cross Blue Shield announced that next year health care premiums are going to go up 33%. And he said it's time for the gloves to come off. We've been nice, we've been pussyfooting around, but the bottom line is that people that are against this are either afraid, or they're ignorant, or they're a part of the problem. And I agree with that 100%. I know people who profess to be constitutionalists, who profess to be conservative or libertarian, and hate a lot of this stuff, but they'll fight tooth and nail against Article 5. And it just drives me insane, because they'll stand up for the Constitution and then go against one of the articles of the Constitution and say, oh, we can't do that. That's too dangerous. Or it's never been done before. Or it'll run away, or something will happen. And I'm sorry, that puts them in the same boat as the people like Michael Bloomberg, who will say, you can't have guns. That's too dangerous. The Second Amendment doesn't apply to people. You can't have guns. It's too dangerous. You explain to me the difference. There's absolutely zero difference, because what you're doing is you're picking a part of the Constitution that you say it should not be followed because it's too dangerous. Well, if I can pick out the part of the Constitution that I don't have to follow, and you pick out a part that you don't have to follow, then we've got a problem here, don't we? We don't really have a Constitution, do we? We don't have anything. And that's kind of where we are. We really don't have anything, because we've got a Congress that goes away from it oversteps its bounds in some places, and other things, the things it's supposed to do, it refuses to do. We've got presidents that can constantly overstep their bounds, and a court that, for crying out loud, doesn't even know what a constitution is or what a boundary is. All they know is what their feelings are. I'm sorry. This has gotten so out of hand. We're going to pick up. It's time to pay some bills. We're going to pick up on this thought here in just a second.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Well, welcome back. Here we are at Lanterns Media Network and Lanterns.buzz, and I appreciate the fact that you're here with me. We were talking about First Amendment and a problem that we've got with the way things are here, and not just the First Amendment, but that was just sort of an example. But the problem we've got with a Congress and actually an entire government that refuses to abide by its enumerated powers. I hope you'll take opportunity one of these times to go back and look in the archives of my articles. I wrote a series of articles. I think there were 4 of them on the enumerated powers, and I looked at Article 1, 2, 3, and then sort of closed up with a general overview, and in Part 4. And I hope you'll take a look at that, because I try to bring out some things that people don't really think about. And that's kind of where I see myself as somebody who needs to maybe bring out some things. If you watch the news, if you listen to your typical talk show people and stuff like that, they're lots of times talking about the day-to-day stuff. And I think we need to go beyond that. We need to get much deeper. I'm involved with the Convention of States for that reason. I'm involved with Founders Keep for that reason. And I do this podcast and I do my writing for these reasons. I could get out there and I could write. I could look at, I can click over here on Facebook and see what's trending, and I can write on the hot topics of the day. And I can write popular articles, and I can get everybody thinking, oh, that's really neat, or that's cool, or whatever like that, and they'll click on it, and it'll be wonderful. And all I'll be is just another person out there just doing the same old stuff, and that's not what this country needs. We don't need anybody else doing that stuff. There's enough people doing it already. I was talking with my son the other day. He's here visiting. He's in the Army, and he's back home for a few days, and we were talking about the fact that people are just completely disengaged, don't really care, and how discouraging it is. But anyway, moving on, looking at some of these comments about the First Amendment. Like it says, Congress shall make no law, and then it goes into 5 different things. It's important that you know those 5 things, and I'm not going to give them to you right now. I can rattle them off, but I'm not going to give them to you. If you don't know the 5 things that are in the First Amendment, you need to go look them up. You won't remember if I tell you, but maybe you'll remember if you go look them up. And you should have a pocket Constitution. If you don't, Google it. The Constitution was authorization for a new kind of government. When we broke away from England, with the Declaration of Independence. And I've gotten into discussions with progressives before about the Declaration has nothing to do with our government, with our Constitution or anything else. And they don't understand that, as Lincoln put it, that the Constitution is a frame of silver around a golden apple, and the golden apple is the Declaration, because the Declaration is what outlines everything that really matters, and the Constitution is nothing but a restriction on government so that they don't bother the things that really matter that are in the Declaration. The laws are written not to restrain you, but to restrain government. The Constitution laid out specific tasks that the new government was authorized to do, and it insisted later in the 10th Amendment of the Bill of Rights that if the task was not specified in the Constitution, the government was not to do it. What have we got? Do you see health care anywhere in there? Do you see anything the government's supposed to do for anybody in there? No, because the Constitution is a restriction on government. The Constitution doesn't ever tell the government to do anything to or for anyone. It prevents them from doing things for and to people. The states pre-existed the federal government. The states formed the federal government. The states have the power. It's like we've all heard the saying where a kid, gets a little bit out of hand or whatever like that, and mother will say, you know what, I brought you into this world and I can take you out. Now, that's said in jest. We don't want mothers to kill their kids, but we well understand what they're saying, and that's what I mean by the states, and that's where Article 5 and Convention of States becomes so vital. Is because the states are the ones that gave them the power, and the states are the ones that can take it back if they're not going to abide by it. Now, some people will say, "Oh, we just need to do interposition and we need to do nullification." Well, I'm sorry, that's a bunch of crap. I'm sick of that, because number one, the states can't nullify Obamacare. The states can't nullify the EPA. The states certainly can't nullify the IRS. If you decide that. If the IRS decides to come get you, the state's not going to get in the way and say, "Oh, you can't touch this guy. He's one of our citizens." No, the state's just going to back off, and you're going to be in tough luck. So I'm sorry. There might be a couple, 3 things where the states can do that, and in some minor ways, but in most cases, that is not how to handle it. There are people who will run to the federal government to protect their rights, whether it's free speech, no matter what it is. These particular comments I'm looking at here were about speech, but it could be anything. But the government is restrained from having any authority in that. And so when we ask the government to do something on our behalf, we are asking the government to violate the Constitution on our behalf. If you look at something, let's say like the Second Amendment, I do not believe we have a Second Amendment right to own firearms. I believe we have a natural right to keep and bear firearms. And the Second Amendment prohibits the government from having anything to do with that, okay? Now, the government's job is to protect rights. So if somebody, like life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, if somebody comes along and throws a rock through my window and burns my car, they've violated my rights, my property rights. They've violated my personal rights if they hurt me physically. And that's where the government's come along and punish them for doing that and do whatever it takes to keep them from doing it again. I have every right to go out here and throw a rock. I don't have every right to go out and throw a rock through your window. So there's things that we are refrain from doing, and then that's the government's job is to step in if we refuse to restrain ourselves. So if the federal government takes a look at the states, and let's look at the state of Maryland or the state of California with some of their arcane gun rights, New Jersey for crying out loud, with some of their gun laws. That's actually a restriction of a federally protected right. Now, if you're going to talk federal supremacy, that's a place where federal supremacy comes in. Federal government should come in and say, you don't have a right to infringe on them. They have a right to that. They have a God-given right to that, and you don't have a right to infringe on them any more on their Second Amendment right any more than you do their First. When we look at these things, though, and going back to this speech deal, there are people who want to go out and make the government move in and keep universities from banning conservative speech on campus. We've got a big stick as people. We've got a big stick. What do universities need to keep going? They need your money. Anybody that's ever graduated from college, I went to one college for one semester. I get letters, phone calls constantly from them wanting me to give them money. I went one semester. I'm sorry, I'm not going to support them. Okay, they got all they're going to get out of me. But the bottom line is that people do give money to their alma mater, and that's good. I think it's a wonderful thing. But you know what? If your alma mater is being an idiot, do you think you should go ahead and give them money? Or do you think maybe you should send them a letter when they send you this little thing, say, hey, we'd like you to throw some money our way and everything like that. Maybe you should drop in that envelope, say, well, you know what? You guys are morons because you are stifling free speech, and I am not going to embrace that, and I'm not going to endorse it, and I'm not going to help pay for it, okay? And they'll get the message. And you know what? That speaks. Money talks. And you'll get some attention. You do it respectfully. You don't have to be ugly. But all you got to do is tell them the way it is. Because what they're doing is basically Saul Alinsky tactics, isn't it? Universities and schools in general, shouldn't they be teaching free thought? Shouldn't they be teaching critical thinking rather than having you memorize things and puke it back out in a test and then to get a grade? Wouldn't it be better if you were made to think and work things out? That's why I like Hillsdale College. I watched those intro to the Constitution with Dr. Larry Yarn sitting there with around a bunch of students. He doesn't lecture to them. He asks them questions and he makes them think. And sometimes they come up with the wrong answer. And so what? They're learning, and I think it's a great opportunity for them. It's a great opportunity for us to look at those things and to watch those. But understand that universities aren't violating anybody's right to free speech. Let me repeat. I paused for a reason. Let me repeat. Universities are not capable of violating your right to free speech. They're not Congress. Now, they can do what they want. And then, you know what? In a free society, we can do what we want. If we're students and we disagree with that, we can check out and go to another college. If we're parents, we can, and we're paying the bills, we can pull our kids out and send them to another college. If we're graduates and we're trying to help support our alma mater, we can stop doing it. And you know what? They'll wake up and they'll figure it out. And if they don't, well, at least you're not supporting it. The First Amendment is a restraint on tyranny. All what we were talking about earlier when I was talking about Charlie Gard and Amy and all like that and her kids. Tyranny is a government who does what it wants. And it makes up the rules as it goes along. That's the whole idea of the Constitution, is that the rules aren't made up as they go along, that we know what they are, we know what the rules are. And that's why we're having problems now, because they make up the rules as they go along. We no longer have a constitutional republic. I argue with people all about that all the time. It's not there. The First Amendment is a restraint on tyranny. The speech it orders Congress not to restrict is political speech designed to oppose the sitting government. And it's interesting that it wasn't very long after passing all this, they came out with the Sedition Act. And I thought, I remember when I first read about that, I thought, you got to be kidding me. Here's these people who just overthrew a tyrannical government, and they're coming along and saying it's against the law to speak out against the government. And of course, that law didn't last very long, and it was taken away. But I find that kind of comical, that even the people who were instrumental in forming this country made mistakes, and we understood, and they understood that that mistakes would be made. So we need to pay attention to some things like that. We're going to take another break here, and we'll press on here. We've got about another 10 minutes or so. We'll be back shortly. And welcome back for the final segment of Voice of Reason. I'm Michael Murphy with Lanterns Media Network and Lanterns.buzz. Once again, a reminder to go in there and check out some of the great articles and the other great broadcasts and podcasts that are available. Lanterns, I told you earlier we're going to talk a little bit about positive and negative rights, and that's what we're going to finish up with here in this last segment. A lot of people don't really give any thought to it. Obviously, people like Bernie Sanders, they just think rights are rights. They've never thought it through. They don't understand that there's a difference in the rights that we have. A negative right is a right for me to be protected from harm if I try to get something for myself. A positive right would be my right to have something provided for me. If health care is a negative right, then the state has an obligation to keep people from preventing me from getting health care and discriminating against me. If health care is a positive right, then the state has an obligation to provide it for me. That's kind of, in a nutshell, a pretty good understanding of what negative and positive rights are. A negative right doesn't cost anybody anything. In other words, the right to free speech doesn't cost you anything. The right to keep and bear arms doesn't cost anybody anything. All those things are just there, and I can choose to do them or I can choose not to do them, and my choices of doing them or not doing them are not incumbent on anybody else. And yet when we look at positive rights, somebody's got to do something. So if there's a right to health care, if I can't afford health care, then somebody's got to provide it for me. Well, the money doesn't fall out of the sky. Contrary to what some progressives and whatever else think, you don't just print up money and hand it out. And that it just doesn't work that way. You have to have an actual economy. And people can say, well, we can kind of do what we want. We've got a lot of flexibility there and all like that. Understand that the reason the Soviet Union fell was economic collapse. They could not keep up with all their social programs and everything that they had going on with their people and keep up with pace of the military buildup in relation to the Cold War. And they basically went broke and collapsed. Understand that was the reason for it. It wasn't we didn't go in and defeat them in a battle. We didn't go beat them at the chess game. We didn't play rock paper scissors and beat them best 2 out of 3. No, it was they just simply went broke because they couldn't keep up, and because of the system that they had would not allow them to make enough money. When you're forcing people to work certain jobs, whether they like it or not, when the government owns the factories or directly controls all the factories, then production is necessarily down. It's just the way it is, because people can't take any pride in their work. It doesn't matter whether you take pride in your work or not. So when health care is a right, that means that somebody's got to provide it. And so you know what? Then somebody has to pay for it. You can say, well, we're going to get rid of the insurance companies. Doesn't really matter. Well, you know what? there's still hospitals have to be built. There's still electric's got to be paid. All those employees have got to be paid. It's still going to cost money. And that money's got to come from someplace. If it doesn't come from me, the person who's seeking health care, and the bills get paid, then somebody's paying them. And understand that's just the way it is. And I don't care whether you're talking health care, whether you're talking everybody gets a car. We could look at, say, like the renewable energies, like solar and wind. Now, we're not really talking about rights here, but those do not exist. Those cannot make it financially without government assistance. That's the only way they make it. Now we're looking at a situation where, how does that get paid? Well, you and I, on April 15th, when our taxes get paid, the bills have to be paid. That's all there is to it. And somebody's got to pay them. And that money doesn't just come doesn't fall out of the sky. That comes from tax dollars. And people make a big deal. They say, well, these big companies, they've got a lot of money. We just need to make them pay more money. Corporations, businesses do not pay taxes. Let me repeat that. Businesses and corporations do not pay taxes. Taxes are a part of their operating expense. What do businesses and corporations do with their operating expense? That's part of their business, of the cost of doing business. It's rolled into the price of the product, and it's passed on to you. So when you say, I want to get that outfit that makes cell phones, man, they're making a ton of money. I want them to pay their fair share. And so we've got them out there. We're going to rake them over the coals and make them pay more. And so then the next time we go get a cell phone, it's $50 more. You got to understand that the money's we are the end payer, and we are the one that pay for it in the end. So when we've got a positive right, you've got to understand that somebody's paying for that. You either pay for it in lost freedom, or you pay for it financially. And that's just the way it is. We've got to understand that there's some things going on in this country, and I'm about out of time, but we've got to get back to some basics, and we've got to start being reactive and become proactive. Because as long as we remain reactive, as I said earlier, we play into the hands of these people who would do us, who would control us. And there's just no way in the world that we can survive as a nation if we continue to just be reactive all the time. It's a sad thing. We are losing what we once had. It's not the country that I was raised in, and we're just going to find out where it ends up. I'm sorry, but I'm out of time, and I appreciate you being here with me. Good night, everybody, and God bless America.